Death is the final stage in a person's life. Dying is a process which isn't instantaneous, but might begin a few weeks before someone passes away. As of now, the leading cause of death is heart disease. Coming in second is cancer. Since death is a general process, certain parts of the body stop functioning before others. This is categorized in 4 other parts.
Clinical death is measured by the individual's heartbeat and respiration. When they stop, the individual is pronounced dead. This is often referenced to in movies, but it's the most unreliable way since there have been cases where people have been alive even though their heartbeat and respiration stop.
The brain death occurs when the brain fails to receive the amount of oxygen necessary for it to thrive. Basically, the cortex is the first part of the brain to die. The midbrain is the one that comes next, it fails. And the last of the brain to die would be the brainstem.
Biological death occurs when the organs, such as the heart and lungs, fail to give off an electrical charge.
And lastly, social death occurs when the terminally ill are beginning to be treated as a corpse rather than someone who's still biologically alive. The legal definition of death is 24 hours of unresponsivity, no reflexes, no breathing, and a flat ECG.
Okay, hi. So in this part of the video, we are going to show and ask a couple of questions to an actual operating room registered nurse. I'm going to ask her a couple of questions about the biological aspects of death. In this portion of the video, I am going to introduce Mrs. Anna Decay, and she is a registered nurse, and she works in an operating room. Okay, so my first question to you, Mrs. Decay, I'm going to ask if any of your terminally ill patients have ever asked for assistance in suicide, or have they ever asked for euthanasia from you guys?
Personally, no, I haven't come across a patient who had asked to help to complete their journey or euthanasia. No. Most of them are still hopeful that there will be a miracle and they will survive, but I have not.
Okay, and so my next question is, have you experienced any of your co-workers with a lack of empathy towards the terminally ill patients that you have worked with? Have you seen any,
Personally, I have not come across any of my colleagues or co-workers who have not shown any empathy. You take care of these patients day in, day out, and you just get attached to them after a while, and of course you have to show most of them show empathy, and have not come across any co-workers who hasn't showed any empathy or sympathy towards a terminally ill patient. You get attached to them, not only to the individual but to the family too.
With part of the social death process,
yes.
Does the family make sure that the corpses, that actually the terminally ill patient is still treated with dignity to the end?
Yes.
Okay.
She just don't want to alienate the individual as if they no longer exist, because they are still there, and as all the patients I've come across with, there's always hope that there would be a miracle and they would survive this ordeal, not unless they're in a lot of pain, that they would want this pain to end. But most of the patients I've dealt with are hopeful and would like to live longer.
Okay, great. What terminally ill illness have you come across with most of your patients?
Most of them are the patients I've dealt with terminal illness had cancer. One patient I had lung cancer, liver cancer, and I also took care of a patient who was HIV, who had pneumocystic carni, and this was years ago, and had passed away within months. But mostly it's patients with cancer, especially liver cancer and lung cancer. I had a patient who had liver cancer who within 2 months had passed away.
Grief is a very difficult feeling to conquer and is closely tied to fear. We live in a society that fears death because it's imminent and it's something that we're all going to have to go through. That said, recently grief has been getting a lot of attention, and it's linked to family dynamics, religion, and society and how it goes.
Okay, so as painful as grief is, there are some people get over their grief quickly, as others can't. There actually are 3 types of morbid reactions that prevent a successful way to conquer your fear of death. The first one is delayed reaction. It is when your feelings are suppressed for your sadness, your grief, anger. It could be put away for days, months, or years, and it won't surface. It could surface up into any kind of different feelings, like it could come out as anger, it could come out as depression. This happens quite often.
Disordered reactions occurs when an individual begins to adopt traits of the deceased. They also gain aspects of the illness of the deceased and also develop psychosomatic symptoms.
Pathological mourning occurs when the grieving process is prolonged and intensified. People that have pathological mourning are usually mentally unhealthy, and they develop habits like making a shrine out of the deceased person's objects.
Psychologists agree that grief is actually a healthy part in the mourning process, and it gives people the ability to understand their own mortality as well as everybody else's, and it also helps people into the transitioning of thinking the world as a place where the deceased are no longer present. However, a renowned psychiatrist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross identified 5 common stages in the grieving period, or rather the 5 common stages in which a person undergoes in the process of dying.
So the first stage is shock and denial. That is when the person is actually shocked at how soon and imminent their death is. Their death is coming. So what they do is they start denying it, and they say, okay, well, if it's not, if I don't think about it, it's not going to happen. So what happens is they just go on as if nothing's happening, and they continue to live their life as regularly as they possibly can. That's because they're denying the shock of their imminent death.
Is the second stage of dying. Anger is usually redirected upon themselves, others, or specifically God. Anger is usually blamed on God for giving them the illness, but that's not the case.
Stage 3 is the bargaining stage, and that's the stage when the terminally ill person or the dying person tries to bargain with God or whoever their higher power is for more time.
Stage is depression. The dying get into some sort of a depression in which they begin to realize that a miracle will most likely not occur. And upon doing so, they begin to accept their death, which is the final stage. Acceptance comes when they begin to realize that everybody dies and their death is imminent, and they rather just choose to seize the day for how much ever time they have left. However, many people never really come to this part, and if they do, sometimes they usually bounce back to a depression or back to a denial or back to some sort of a shock factor. A hospice is an institution in which the terminally ill can go to ease their process of dying. They were first established in 1971, and although they were a bit controversial at first, they were actually around since the dawn of man. See, people would go to these certain places in which they would just pretty much just go to die. But in modern times, it's all about comfort. It's all about bringing some sort of sense of relief to those that are dying. You know, they provide their favorite music, their favorite foods, and they actually provide someone for them to speak to because they want to be heard rather than being treated as living corpses. Now, the next few clips we will show you guys an interview with a chaplain who provides religious services and care for those that are terminally ill at a hospice. What exactly is your mission in the hospice? Like, what are some duties that you undertake, and what are you trying to make the patients feel?
Comfortable.
Comfort.
This is all about comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Every patient, regardless of their faith tradition, has spiritual needs.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest one, of course, is finding meaning and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And they also want their story heard, whatever that story is. And many of them are painful.
Mm-hmm.
If they can tell that story, if they can find somebody to listen to that story without judgment, without trying to fix it, without offering advice and counsel, just to listen to that story, their physical pain diminishes. It makes the rest of the team's job easier.
Mm-hmm.
So we work as a team. If I see something that's going on spiritually that may affect care,
Mm-hmm.
I have to let the nurse and the social worker and home health aide, the doctor, everybody involved, know that there's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I have a patient who was thrown through a window as a child, and no one could figure out why he didn't want to be stood up when they tried to get him to the shower, and they would have his back to a window and he would flip out.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody understood why until I uncovered that he'd been thrown through a window once.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's all coming back now. What we go through as children, we learn to stuff down
Mm-hmm.
because we have to get through school, get married, we have kids. We don't have time to deal with spiritual issues.
Mm-hmm.
We may be able to go to church every Sunday
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, or, get our kids to Sunday school, catechism, whatever. But we don't have the luxury of time of sitting in quiet and dealing with our spiritual issues. We don't even have the maturity to do it.
Yeah.
Until we're about 50, and then all of a sudden it bubbles to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, really? I gotta deal with that again?
Yeah.
Yeah, you never dealt with it to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually a psychologist that comes up with theories as to why that happens, which brings me to the next question. So in your years of experience, would you say that as we reach our middle life, there's some sort of religious awakening in which
Yes.
we reinvent ourselves?
Yes, and the book to read on that is called Falling Upward
Mm-hmm.
by Father Richard Rohr.
Mm-hmm.
It's excellent in dealing with the spirituality of the second half of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, he nails it. He just
Yeah.
nails it. So, yeah, there's definitely a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Who I am spiritually, speaking as my own person here, who I am spiritually today versus who I was spiritually in my 20s when I thought I knew everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because, hey, in your 20s you know everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Then you get to be 35 and you go, oh wow, I
And
don't know anything at
yeah,
all.
it happens at 35 actually. According to the psychologist, it's at 35 when we're the most individuated,
Uh-huh.
meaning that, we try to seek how different we are, but and then it's until later in life where we actually try to reinvent ourselves and how we try to figure out what brings us together, where we focus on creativity and things like that, just to give our life a sense of purpose and meaning.
Mhm.
So, which brings me to the next question: when it comes to your patients who are, at a way later stage in life, do you see that sometimes they try to bring forth their creativity, or they try to bring a sense of unity in the hospice or in their own communities?
No, I think they're too sick by the time they get
Yeah.
to me for that.
Mm-hmm.
What we're trying to do is just keep them comfortable and help them or their families
Mhm.
or both deal with whatever
Mm-hmm.
might affect their end of life experience. Because that transition, everyone in the family is going to handle differently, depending on the size of the family.
Mm-hmm.
We have some families, there's 2 kids in the family and they're all, they're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're living out of state. They're fine.
Mm-hmm.
We have others there's 6, 7, 8 kids in the family and they each have their own take on what is best for mom or dad.
Yeah.
And that can cause tension in the family. Now we have to unpack all of that because that's coming from someone.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming from their own fears. It's
Yeah.
coming from their own belief system.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of families that have a diversity of religions going on in the family. So this one believes this about end of life. This one over here's got something else going on. This one wants to go down the path that mom is going, and it can be chaos at that point. So now we have to find the common thread, which is always compassion, mercy. And
It was actually way longer than that, but she just got into depth about some supernatural processes that occurred in her experience, as well as the grieving period, and just pretty much just stuff that goes on in a hospice and her own experiences. But we apologize for the really long video, and we hope you guys have a really fun winter break, and good luck on finals.